Today, I want to really get straight into things. I am your host, Mark Smith. I'm also known as the NZ365 guy. My parents weren't too creative when they gave me a name, so I had to differentiate online. So if you Google NZ365 guy, you'll be able to find me and connect if you haven't done so already. But let's get underway. I want to talk today about the synergies between the Microsoft Power Platform and SAP. And if for any time you've been working in SAP, there has been this push to go for what we call as clean core on SAP. If we look on the left-hand side, a legacy ERP approach, in the past, a lot of application development, custom apps, etc., is built in that core system. And the recommendation from SAP is that, hey, you should actually keep your core clean as you move forward. And then all the day-to-day operations, all the other systems that hold data inside your organization, the automations, etc., can actually sit outside of that clean core. So you have the ability for forward gradability and use the capacity of SAP to really drive those very best endeavors. And one of the things that we do at IBM is this whole modernization to clean core, from legacy ERP, whatever SAP version you're currently running, is getting you to that clean core and then understanding the various departments that touch your SAP system and really turning it into a system of operations and a system of intelligence. Now, it happens that one of those tools that we use then around the outside and for day-to-day interactions with SAP is actually the Microsoft Power Platform. And if we have a look at these two technologies coming together, you can see that it addresses some of the common challenges faced by SAP customers. And they are over-engineered systems, inconsistent data across systems, lack of transparency and integration, right? The most common method of updating or enriching data in SAP is still Excel. And then we hear a lot of people are still copying and pasting data in and out of SAP as part of their day-to-day operational processes. There's skill issues when it comes to, maybe developing on Fiori and updating and building out solutions that you want to do over time. And the funds are not there for the transformation you want to see. And there's that lack of agility to be able to transform your business and move it forward as market trends dictate. And this is where we see, as you keep that core SAP system clean and your data accessible via the enterprise ERP connector to the Power Platform, you can then become very agile. You can build applications that adhere to the governance that is already in place in SAP and really allow you to develop your organization across these kind of four lenses. If we look at data is everywhere in the organization, right? And to understand data, we need it not to be siloed. We need it not to be stale. We need to be able to analyze it and understanding, but not just from the dimension of one data set like SAP, but all the interconnected data sets that will also exist inside the organization. And we look at it from four kind of lenses. We look at from how you engage your customers, how you transform the products and services you go to market with, how do you empower your people inside the organization, and then do you have a model of optimizing your operations? And it's by taking telemetry data, what we call digital exhaust, into a core system that allows you to understand what is truly going on in your organization. And therefore, it drives operational excellence and innovation from your products and service, from how your staff interact, from your operational excellence and product development over time. It allows you to take advantage of that. And this is how we see the orchestration coming together. If we take a look, and I just want to index slightly here on the concept of data and why data is so important. And as I go through, you'll see there's some stats on the slides or my source of where information is coming from. I'll get Alice to drop those links into the chat so that you can go and research further if you wish. But notice this, 54% increase in revenue performance if you have your data estate in good order. 44% faster time to market, 62% improvement in customer satisfaction, and 54% increased profit results. These are pretty telling results when you get your data estate talking to each other, when you get it indexed, clean, usable, and moving away from siloed data sets across your organization. If we have a look at the challenges facing organizations, we see this data is stuck in silos, making real-time insight difficult, right? Stale data. How can you make the best decision on data that actually was from 3 months or 6 months or 12 months ago and is no longer relevant to the decisions you need to make today? Data continues to increase. I remember 6 years ago doing presentations like this around that big data was going to be a big deal, right? That we were going to produce more data than ever before. And organizations have absolutely done that. The challenge has been, now that we have all this data, how do we get a lens on it? How do we get a view of that data that is accessible to the people that need to make decisions in the day-to-day operations of the business? More people throughout the organization want access to real-time data on demand, right? They want to make sure that the data set that I'm working with is the most up-to-date. It's not a copy, it's not a duplicate, but it is accurate. Data must be managed and secure. All the way through this, think heavily that Microsoft and how they've implemented the integration between the Microsoft Power Platform and SAP, first and foremost, is around security and governance being paramount, right? It's no longer acceptable to have risk around data being leaked from your SAP system outside the organization, but also importantly, that it doesn't get leaked inside the organization, right? If you all of a sudden make data sets in SAP available, some of that, let's say in an HR scenario, will be confidential within inside the organization. And therefore, you want to make sure that those security protocols are honored, and Microsoft indexed heavily on that when they built the SAP ERP connector. It's difficult to find people to hire with data skill sets, right? It's increasingly difficult. They're in demand. And so really you want to create a data estate that is consumable, accessible by the people that need the information, but fully governed as part of that. If we have a look at where, what are the use cases that you can tap into? It really touches every part of your organization. Workforce, finance, marketing, sales, service, and operations all have data often sitting in SAP, depending on the software applications you're using in your organization. Those data sets need to be accessible by the various departments. And so, for example, if you're going to make finance data available, and you're going to make it available to the Microsoft Power Platform as we go down that path, you want to make sure it's ring-fenced only inside an environment that the finance team might have access to. If other parts of the organization do not need access to that financial data that you are going to build new solutions against and create automations against, you can ring-fence that so that it is only contained with the people that have the permissions to access that information. If we take a look at any data sources in an organization, they don't stand on their own without being integrated to something else. And so if you have a look on the right-hand side, there's customer signals from legacy systems and other systems, whether they be website assets, IoT devices, as you can see in the real-time tracking of products and processes across web devices and sensors. And you might want to drill in and understand across that bottom layer there, reducing supply chain linkage, improve customer experience, optimize order-to-cash processes, save costs, and create new revenue streams. This is possible as we bring these two platforms together to really enable and empower your organization. As I said, even though on the SAP side, you might have all your core data sets in there, you're bound to have supporting other data sets outside of there, like screenshots of various activities that needed to be captured, files, PDF documents, other type of documents, image formats, etc., that might relate to data sitting inside SAP, but it doesn't actually reside in the SAP system itself. And so when we look at bringing SAP and the Power Platform together, it's taking the standard functionality of the SAP environment and the data that it holds, and then using your unique business requirements to rapidly build solutions. And one of the key things that we're seeing is around this area of integration into Microsoft Teams, right? From within that surface or that experience, being able to query SAP data directly. Something like 91% of the Fortune 100 companies in the world all use Microsoft Teams. Over 200 million active users, I think it is, on Teams. These organizations also using Outlook, and they're wanting to gain access to SAP data, but from within these collaboration type tool sets. Then you have the ability to build apps that are highly mobile, work across Android and iOS devices, whether it be phone, tablet, or any type of surface that you want to present this data on. You can see in the automation side of things, and I'm going to jump into this in a moment with Power Virtual Agents, but it's around this holistic approach of having a tool set that allows for collaboration, that as you can see under the safeguards there, that adheres to the SAP process and strict governance around security is included. But it opens up, by bringing these two technologies together, so many more options for your organization. As you can see here, SAP is a critical system. It's at the heart of most enterprises. In fact, you might have 3 or 4 other enterprise applications that make up your core systems of record that you have in your organization. And sometimes you need it to do more than just what you get out of the box. And it's at that point that we hit this concept of rough edges, right? What really is optimized in SAP, or is it actually done or better done in another application? We see this requirement for paper and Excel exports happening, emails, screenshots that I touched on before. It can lead to poor user experience. And one of the things that we hear, but SAP, solid system, but sometimes on the user experience front, the day-to-day people working with data sets in it is not optimal. So then you get into custom development, right? And you want to maintain that clean core as part of your strategy. And this is where you can really open up the innovation in your organization to integrate to your collaborative solutions, well, all the way, governance, security, compliance, and identity being managed. It's not just about SAP. It's about enabling everyone to innovate. What do I mean by that? It's not about just allowing your Fiori or your RUM experts, etc., to build out solutions. It's giving people that use your data sets, your software every day in your organization, to actually using a low-code platform like the Power Platform to actually build solutions for themselves, make themselves more productive. And as they make themselves more productive, they will share their insights with others in your organization. Therefore, it's like a rising tide, as they say, floats all boats. If we have a look at what is the Power Platform, because some of you, might have joined today. By the way, thank you for the people that are returning today, because we noticed a number of people that attend my last webinar about 6 weeks ago have come along again today. But I want to talk about the Power Platform here. And if you have a look at it, when the Power Platform is integrated to your SAP system, you get that governance, control, and monitoring, because it is through a single API, depending on how you set it up. That's what I'm going to suggest, that you get that control in place. And then it lights up these kind of 5 key technologies from Microsoft that make up the core Power Platform that sit on the Dataverse, which is a highly scalable logic engine, business logic engine, metadata engine, and data tool to build solutions rapidly through what we call the declarative development, drag and drop type of experience. Specify what you want, what type of field, and it will build out everything behind the scenes that you would need. Now, take a look at a few of these. Power Virtual Agents allows for a chatbot experience. We can bring in the Azure OpenAI service over this, use your data to ground that OpenAI service in Azure. Therefore, there's no, public exposure to any of that data. And then people ask questions against your data sets in natural language and get those responses back. Power Pages is used when you want to allow certain data sets outside the organization, or let's say contractors, to access data sets that you might have available. One of the projects that we did was in forestry, and what they want to do is have their contractors that, let's say, went through a new bit of forest that was going to be cleared or felled in the logging industry. They had to submit certain documents, photographs, etc., back in that had to be tied into the SAP dataset. And so we provided a Power Page portal, credentialed, made sure they could only access what they could, and upload that information so it was captured with all the metadata around it, rather than the old way was sending emails with attachments and then someone is going to sort out where those attachments go, copy data out of them, and none of that metadata included. You have Power Apps, and as I say, it allows you to build any type of app across Android and iOS devices, or a computer or any type of screen. Rapid app development. Power Automate is really the heavy lifting of this connection between SAP and the Power Platform. It all happens through a Power Automate connector that allows us to light up the other areas. And of course, what you're probably most familiar with is Power BI, right? To analyze, to understand the data sets that you have, not just the data sitting in SAP, but also those other data sets that you might have around the organization, extending that with tools like Microsoft Fabric. If we take a look at then, as we look at your landscape inside the organization, you can see on the left-hand side here, if you want to create high-value solutions, it's around plugging in the data sets and making them available, right? Ingestion of that data, storing it in the correct format from a cost perspective, right? Keeping your cost for storage as low as possible. It's then the intelligent piece. Right over that, it's where we run AI, machine learning, models, etc., about how that's used, and then deciding what surface do we need it served in. Is 50% of what the staff in your organization do, is their Surface Teams? Is that all they need? Well, we make sure it's Surface there, that point of action, that point of interface. One other thing to consider, of course, is AI. AI has exploded since around November last year, and we see the stat here around the ever-increasing content from generative AI. And one of the things we're getting asked more and more, particularly in public sector at the moment in Australia, is can we start testing generative AI against our own data sets? So we start querying it, making sense of it. Can we start grounding it and using the Azure OpenAI service in our secured environments that allow us to really understand that data and make it more valuable to staff? In other words, giving an internal ChatGPT, but inside the organization, so no leakage of organization IP data or anything like that. If you look at this metric here from Source 2023 Work Trends Index, employees are ready to embrace AI. Unfortunately, so many employers have been told, don't use ChatGPT for company data, which is correct, right? You don't want to leak your IP. You don't want to give your code. There's already many examples of where it's happened. But there needs to be an alternative provided, right? And this is a secure ChatGPT experience like in Azure on the OpenAI large language model that allows you and allows your staff to actually start using this, but without any risk of data breach or training OpenAI's future models on your data. 64% of employees lack time and energy to do their job, right? They're looking for how can this AI thing help me day to day. 3.5% more likely to struggle with strategic thinking. 70% employees willing to delegate some form of work to AI. I'm using AI in my life all day, every day. One of the things I do is I podcast, and now it looks at the transcript from my podcast and automatically suggests the most relevant title based on the content that has happened through the interviews I have done on my shows. It transcribes it all. It automatically creates the tweets for me based on the content in those episodes. Since I have been doing it, I have had an over 50% increase in listenership on my podcast purely because that kind of rich information is extracted from the transcript and presenced in a repeatable format that is informative and attractive to the listeners. If we look at the differences between OpenAI and the Azure OpenAI, and it's worth investigating for your organization because you can see the compliance is built in here. The responsible AI is built in here. The APIs are available to you. I'd never suggest an organization use directly OpenAI, but the Azure OpenAI allows it to be inside your Azure tenant to carry out your activities and engagement. Let me talk about low code and why low code is such a critical thing that has taken off around the world. And it's really around these three lenses. 4 million shortfall in developers by 2025, according to IDC. That's a massive shortfall in solutions that need to be built, but there are not enough developers in the world to build them. 750 million new apps will be created by 2025. These can be simple apps to very complex. With the Power Platform, one of the most complex apps I did was around border protection in Australia and monitoring and interception of all air cargo coming into Australia. That was built in the predecessor to the Power Platform with Microsoft's new brand on it called the Power Platform today. It's incredible what can be built with this toolset. 65% of application dev activity will be in low code going forward. If this is what Gartner is telling us and IDC is telling us on their research of many, many organizations, it's worth taking a look at your organization to ask the question, what's our low code strategy? Because I see a lot of people that are doing low code tactically, right? They just do it for one little thing, but they don't look at it as a surface of adoption, of a usability, of engagement for staff that is ubiquitous as Excel and Outlook and Microsoft Teams. So in asking yourself, what low-code platform will you use? The highest ranked one is the Power Platform, according to latest analyst reports. And I guess that you're on this call today because you are using the Power Platform. You already have it in place. If you did an audit, you'd be surprised at how many apps and automations had already been built inside your tenant. If we take a look at what Microsoft has provided here, 25 pre-built Power Apps and growing around introducing order to cash, procure to pay, record to report, etc., that are already Power Apps pre-built over SAP data models, pre-built automated flows using common SAP processes, new SAP connector and actions. Now, I want to just index on the word new here. I am talking to a range of organizations that implemented a ERP connector for the Power Platform that came out a year and a half to 2 years ago. And the new connector, the version 2 connector, was totally rewritten. It supports authentication via SAP. It supports honoring the license model that is provided in SAP to the user. It's load balanced. There are so many. It allows for RFCs as well in that new connector. So if you're using the old connector, I suggest you to go through an exercise of evaluating the new SAP ERP connector from Microsoft for the Power Platform and make sure it is configured and set up and governed according to your organization policy and practices. If you're using that old one, it's not going to do a lot of what we're going to show you here in a moment. You've got to think about the governing model for your organization. And how you govern your environment is going to be different based on who's going to use it. If it's going to be individual contributors around personal productivity, you're going to sandbox them off, right? From what they can and can't do to some degree. Then from a managed environment, you would run a full dev ALM process around any app automation, RPA, chatbot, etc., that you would run, allowing, of course, multiple contributors, security, robustness, etc. And then you've got the centralized model where you've got a business DevOps model running, where you're running, that quality, the production environments in a repeatable framework using pipelines, etc. You still have the common services available, but you can specifically control who access to what under the deployment model. What we call this is a fusion development model. It will be different slightly for every organization. You might only use one portion of it, or you might invite the entire landscape to operate. We need to look at patterns for Power Platform integration. So I'm going to look at just quickly, how can you integrate? How do I take SAP and Power Platform and bring them together? Well, the first one is API based, right? And this is using the SAP ERP connector from Microsoft. There's 1,000 other connectors, right? So we're not just limited to interfacing to SAP, but we can plug into all the other solution landscape that you might have to mix and bring in the data sets, those siloed data sets that you need access to. You can do RPA based, right? And you can have attended and unattended, hybrid with API in certain situations. If you've got some more mainframe systems, etc., we can still interact with that using RPA. And then the last one is batch synchronization between the two. If we have a look at the connector from Microsoft that's API based, this is the one here. It requires a data gateway with the SAP.NET connector, right? It invokes BAPI, as you can see, custom RFCs through that. And this is, as much as possible, our first, we try to solve any problems using this one first and foremost. But then you can, of course, for unique scenarios, older systems, we can go down to custom connectors and then ultimately even OData connectors. The thing is with this, right, there's going to be, you're going to have to maintain the code, etc., in your environment over time and maintain that, where this option here is maintained by Microsoft. You, of course, have, as I said, got RPA-based and, of course, your batch and synchronization. One other benefit of bringing the two technologies together is you widen. Remember, I talked about that lack of developers. You widen the people that can produce solutions for your organization, from citizen developers through to professional developments. And anywhere on this continuum, you can support those, right? You can make access for, let's say, on your citizen development, you might provide only read-only access. Hey, I need to know what the status of the shipment is. That's it. It's a view record. You could do a chatbot quickly in Microsoft Teams that allows an individual to query some type of information that they need in their day-to-day job quickly, right? Without taking multiple clicks to get access to it, you could query that type of information, maybe run a report, do simple type automations and Power Apps, but then right up to your professional developers, you can still, of course, involve your SAP Fiori developers. You can use all those IDE type technologies that you'd use in Pro Dev, but you'd also, no matter what, make sure an ALM lifecycle was running across this. So take a look at a customer. This is one of our larger customers, global customers at IBM. And you can see they want to transform source to pay for the organization. It was fragmented, lack of timely and visibility. It was across 90 countries. So as I say, it's on the enterprise side, right? And you can see the solution was a range of IBM IP, AI models, and then we used Azure, Logic Apps, Power Automate. End users were given the modern tools to engage, and you can see we provided Power Apps, Power Virtual Agents, Microsoft Teams, and Power BI. Look at the impact. 95% touchless transactions, 80% reduction in life cycle time, and 50% decrease in cost per invoice. Looking at your organization, wouldn't they be amazing stats to take advantage of? Here's a bit more detail around it, that SAP, that tool set being made available. And through, you can see this analyze, onboard, source, contract, buy, receive, pay, and manage process was using a lot of these low-code tools over the SAP data sets. Another thing that you want to look at inside your organization is your app modernization strategy. If you have a look at, if you've been going through this process for the last 5 years of digital transformation, you've been deciding about what remains, rehost, refactor, rebuild, replace, or retire. And you can see the percentages of data of where these sit. And in the middle here, this sweet spot, so 60 to this 15% across this area, they can all be accelerated using the Power Platform. When you think about business agility for core systems, wrapping these core technologies around the outside of any type of system, using those APIs, you can drill in and really bring those siloed data sets and make them interacting, across the entire app landscape. I've touched on AI everywhere. AI everywhere, you're going to hear a lot more going forward. But this is really your on-ramp to really getting your AI strategy in place. As your data estate gets set right, it opens up opportunities for you. Another thing to look at is hyper-automation, right? Where you scale innovation with fusion development, but also then bringing tools like AI, machine learning, RPA, robotic process automation, and you start looking at, is it possible to automate over 50% of our operations using technology? How can you uncover and find bottlenecks in your processes automatically and then approve on them? So you basically create a mechanism similar to DevOps, but for automation, where every automation is constantly improving. It's taking telemetry data. It's learning, improving, and removing bottlenecks from your processes so your organization becomes more agile. I've talked about collaborative apps and making your SAP data available across things like Outlook and Teams, voice channels to your call centers and such are all available solutions that you can build. And as we draw to a close, I want to touch on Dataverse, right? You've seen it at the core of many pitches, and it's an API-driven tool set and at the core of the Power Platform. By deploying a single table, for example, it automatically puts these security constructs in place. As you move through, it puts this logic layer in place. It puts the data, cataloging, searching, modeling, storage goes in place and finally integrating to any number of surfaces. It's a powerful tool. I've been actually working with this core underlying technology for 20 years. 2003 is when I first implemented it in New Zealand at the company I work for. And this model has been effective and has been running ever since, and is now the core of the Power Platform. A couple of other patterns to consider. Here's an inspection process. Which is around using an app, take photos to look at for errors, etc. You can take GPS data. And we've got scenarios where people are using satellite data as part of that ingestion layer. Email processing, rather than having someone copy and paste content out of emails, using AI to automatically extract data, plug it into your SAP system where appropriate. And then inventory checks, being able to use a PVA to, check the status of an order, check the status of really anything that's going on in SAP as you see fit. One of the things a lot of organizations ask us to do is help them with choosing the right path for their solution. What's their decision matrix? And I've just created a high-level one here to illustrate the point. But as you can see, there is still going to be plenty of use cases where the optimal environment is SAP to build out your solution. But anytime you're going cross-system, or you don't have the resource or the backlog for your SAP solutions is over a year long, you might want to consider the Power Platform and the benefits that come with it. Often we go into organizations, we do tailored versions of these. There'll be Oracle systems, Pega systems, other automation solutions as part of the app landscape, and you want to go, okay, what is the best thing to use? Because human nature is the person who's an expert on any product will always find that their product is the best thing to use. So we do a lot of consulting around how to choose rationally the right solution based on a range of things, from resources to licensing to security, etc., to what surface the information needs to be made available on. As we close, and final thoughts, I'll say a little something about IBM, right? We've got a long history in SAP. We've got a long history in Australia and New Zealand on SAP, and very large projects, and globally, as you can see. Our Microsoft partnership, we are now the 5th largest GSI in the world, and with Microsoft, Global System Integrator. Why that's an interesting fact is because we only started this serious journey with our Microsoft partnership a bit over 3 years ago. And so we have rapidly moved to that position and well on our way to achieve top 3 in the next 18 months. What's my call to action for you? We can come in, we can help educate your teams if you need be. We can set up your foundations and security architecture and get them aligned because we have the SAP resources as well as the Power Platform expertise. If you want to do a POC, you want to validate something, I always recommend when you do the integration, you start with read-only, right? Not allowing people to edit, update until your comfort level as an organization and your security policies are totally satisfied before you move forward. We can come and do a platform assessment from an SAP lens and also a Power Platform lens and go, do you have the deployment model set up for optimal security, for optimal governance, but also optimal innovation within your organization? That brings us to an end. My name is Mark Smith. I am based in New Zealand, but I actually work for Sydney, Australia of IBM. So therefore work right across Australia on all our projects. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. If there's something that sparked your interest that you'd like to discuss further, I also want to just talk about, I do a podcast. I've been doing it for over 6 years. There are 3 podcast episodes that I've done this year with Marisol Holberg and John. Now, these are all experts in Microsoft around SAP, Azure, and the Power Platform. So if you go to my podcast, nz365guy.com, do a search for SAP, you'll find these 3 episodes come up. Take a listen to them because they will go into even more detail in a lot of what I've spoken in the interviews with those folks.